happy to continue conversations via email with anyone. If you have questions about what I've said or you disagree, let's engage and talk about it. So a couple introductory points. First, and most importantly, why are we here today talking about the bleak outlook for coal bailouts? Anyone who watches the energy markets knows the coal industry is in serious trouble. The political rhetoric around the energy markets is higher than it's been for years, if not decades. The truth of the matter is nothing can reverse the market forces that are pushing the U.S. coal industry into further decline. So let's dive into the presentation and look at the information which suggests to us that there's really no hope for any kind of long-term reverse of the industry's decline, no matter what the coal industry and its allies in government would like people to believe. Sorry about that. The key takeaways I'd like you to remember from the presentation, and this is one of the few slides where I'll probably spend a minute or two going through all of the information on them. Coal plants continue to be exposed to the same significant economic and financial risks as they did before November of 2016. Nothing's changed there. The market forces working against coal are inexorable, to use one of my favorite words these days. The increases in renewable resources cannot be stopped. Cost of decline's too much for that. The coal industry and its allies in Washington and in the states maybe can slow down some, but cannot reverse the industry's long-term decline. Bailing out coal-fired generators and the fossil fuel industry will be expensive and it won't work long-term. And for these reasons, it's prudent for communities, states, regions, and the nation to plan for the transition away from coal. Another big takeaway is that coal plants are increasingly caught in either, you can consider it a death spiral for many, or at least a near-death experience. Many coal-fired plants are generating much less power than they did before, and they're not operating as baseload generators, and I'll explain that term in a few minutes. In addition, because energy market prices are so low, the plant owners are getting less revenue for each megawatt hour sold. In addition, production costs at many plants are increasing. At many plants, expensive capital expenditures, CapEx they're called, are also necessary. The combination of selling less power while generating at a high cost and selling at low prices is never good. Coal is in serious trouble even without the EPA. The next few slides are just, maybe you've seen before, but just document the decline of the coal industry. Total U.S. generation has declined significantly in the last decade, meaning that coal no longer provides half of the total U.S. generation mix. In 2016, it was 30.4%. And this has led to a decline in coal production, in mining, as you would expect. Less generation, with less generation, there's less of a need for coal. It's not just a national issue, but it's a state issue. Slide 7 shows the total thousands of gigawatt hours that were generated at the 20 largest coal-burning states in 2011. These range from Colorado up to Texas, which was #1. As we go to the next slide, you'll see, and these 20 states accounted for 80% of the total U.S. Generation of coal in 2011. You can see from slide 8 that the generation from coal in these states has declined by an average of 30% in just the 5 years from 2011 to 2016. The largest declines were in Pennsylvania and Oklahoma. Even West Virginia had a decline. So it's definitely a statewide problem as well as a national issue. There has been some recovery in coal-fired generation so far in 2017. Slide 9. Someone could. Okay, mute, please.
We ask everybody to put their phones on mute.
Okay, thanks. Slide 9 shows ERCOT. ERCOT is the independent system operator in Texas. You can see that these are all first quarter coal generation numbers. It went up fairly, looks like substantially from 2016 to 2017. A couple of points though. First is it's unclear how long this will be sustained. Second is that even though generation was up in the first quarter of 2017, it's still below historic levels. You can see that first quarters of 2011, 13, 14 were higher. And if we'd gone back further, it would have been coal generation would have been higher. As significantly, generation from wind is up significantly. It's generation from wind in Texas, in ERCOT in Texas, has increased, has doubled since 2013. So it's something to be monitored, unclear how long it will go. Other evidence of industry distress, some 250 coal plants have been retired or have announced that they will be retired in coming years. Mines have been closed. U.S. coal exports have declined. 5 of the largest coal mining companies went bankrupt in 2015 or 2016. Merchant plant owners, also known as independent power producers, IPPs, are under particular financial distress. In addition, mine employment has continued to fall. You can see here that from a high of 862,000 miners in 1924, in through December of 2016, excuse me, that number declined to 75,000. And it's unclear whether the increased generation at coal plants has led to any major increase in employment, or that whether that will be sustained is probably a better way to think of it. Despite all of this, these problems, the new administration and coal's other allies claim they will make coal great again by eliminating the EPA regulations and DOE programs, reducing funding for the EPA, the National NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and NASA programs that are related to climate change, bailing out failing coal-fired generators, and acting in the states to either roll back rooftop solar incentive programs or eliminate or stall renewable energy mandates. But we don't believe any of this will work. As I said before, this is one of the takeaways. Coal-fired generators continue to face the same energy and economic risks. Low natural gas and energy market prices, rising coal plant operating costs, growing competition from wind and solar as prices decline, little to no growth in the demand for power, low and or volatile capacity market prices, an aging coal fleet, continuing state and federal environmental regulations, and as you'll see later, also competition in the Southeast if the nuclear plants under construction are actually completed. Bailing out coal plants would be very expensive. I'm going to give you two examples based on one analysis we did last year for Coal Strip 1 and 2, and then an analysis we're doing right now for the Navajo generating station in Arizona. Excuse me. Last year we found that bailing out Coal Strip 1 and 2, which back then was a plan, well, not really a plan, but was a dream of the state, that instead of having the 2 units retire, the state would somehow either buy them itself or would require one of the state's utilities, Northwestern Energy, to buy them. Our analysis showed that that would cost state ratepayers and or taxpayers somewhere in the range of $800 million between 2017 and 2030. And that didn't even include a number of costs, as you can see on this slide. So the cost was far more expensive than the $800 million that we assumed in that, or calculated in that analysis. I would say that if we redid this analysis today, we would probably have an even bigger price to the bailout. Turning to slide 15, this is analysis we're doing right now, which shows that from 2020 to 2030, it would cost roughly $2 billion in order to bail out the Navajo generating station, whose owners have decided that they want to retire the plant because they don't need the power, and it's more expensive to generate at Navajo than to buy it in the market or generate it gas-fired plants in the state. This analysis is based on the owner's projected costs.
David, we have a question for you back one of
Sure.
your previous slides.
The reason why coal-fired generation is up in ERCOT 2016 to 2017 is an uptake in the price of natural gas. That it's the projections of gas prices that I've seen for the last 6-8 months have been pretty consistent, that it's expected that gas prices in 2017 will be higher than they were in 2016, but the expectation is that next year they'll be back down. So it's nothing surprising. We shouldn't expect anything to go linearly. A couple of, oops, sorry, oops, went the wrong way, apologize. Whoops, I've got this going, there we go. Couple of introductory factors to consider as we go through the rest of the presentation. One is that different classes of coal plant owners are exposed to different levels of risk, and the U.S. is a complex mix of regulated states and areas with competitive wholesale energy markets. In addition, some areas have capacity markets as well as energy markets, and I'll explain these in a minute. There are basically three different classes of coal plant owners. There are regulated utilities like Southern Company, which own their own coal plants directly. These regulated companies, their rates and services regulated by state commissions. If the State Public Service Commission approves, they can pass along increased costs. These regulated companies also can increase their profits by making expensive capital expenditures for upgrades at their plants. For example, I did a study back 2008 which showed that a regulated utility in New Hampshire could make $40 million more profit a year by putting on a scrubber. So they weren't screaming about having to do an environmental upgrade. It was profitable for them. But some costs could be found to be imprudent, and ratepayers could resist rate increases. I'll get to the Navajo question later. Merchant plant owners, on the other hand, unlike regulated companies, are fully exposed to market risks. All of the risks: increased operating costs, lower generation, reduced revenues from lower market prices. The third class of owners, power agencies, membership co-ops, and municipal utilities, also, like regulated companies, can pass higher costs along to their consumers, but they face a more direct potential for ratepayer backlash or customer losses. Now, the second point I mentioned was the country is a mix of competitive wholesale markets. Those are the areas in the colors, and regulated areas that are in the white. In some white areas, there are also markets where independent power producers sell power, for example, in Arizona, but it's not as if there's an actual market where companies bid in their generators and the price at which they want for power to see which plants are actually operated during each hour. The main ISOs, they're called, concerning coal these days are PJM, MISO, Southwest Power Pool, and ERCOT, which I mentioned before. The area covered from ERCOT north, that middle section of the country, as we'll discover in a bit, is pretty much the main wind corridor of the United States, including going into Minnesota and Iowa. That's really where the highest potential for wind, and as you would onshore wind, and as you would expect, the southern portion of the country is the area with the greatest potential for solar. Okay, turning now to the risk to coal from low natural gas prices. Natural gas prices were high through the end of 2008 when they collapsed. Like, is a word I use a lot. It's the fracking revolution, as the industry calls it. They suddenly discovered that we had all this gas. My guess is they knew about it but decided previously to profit from high gas prices for a while, but that's just based on no inside information. As you can see from the dashed line, it's expected that natural gas prices will remain low in coming years. Somebody please mute their... Okay. There's debate about how low gas prices will remain. If you talk to utilities that try to justify the continued operation of their coal plants, they'll come in with projections of very high gas prices that are completely unrealistic. My expectation, I think it's well-founded, is that gas prices will remain low. Now, what does that mean? The tan bars are the annual production costs per megawatt hour for the Barry combined cycle plant. It's owned by Alabama Power. I believe it's near Mobile. You can see that the cost of generating power at Plant Barry dropped considerably from $70 a megawatt hour to $33 a megawatt hour. I'm sorry, $70 a megawatt hour in 2008 to $33 a megawatt hour in 2009, and that's basically the collapse of natural gas prices. And the production costs have remained low ever since. Conversely, and I'll talk about this more in a couple of minutes, the blue bars are the annual production costs at Plant Barry, which is a coal-fired unit at the same site. Alabama Power has two plants, at the site. you can see how since 2006 the price of generating power jumped and has remained high. What this has meant is that Plant Barry, the gas-fired plant, has been generating more over time, and the coal-fired plant has been generating less. I don't know if the word metaphor is the right term. I don't think it is, but this is really a prime example, a prime illustration of what's happening in markets and states all around the country. Gas plants have been generating more, especially since 2008. Coal plants have been generating less. I mean, there are exceptions, of course. Some areas, the gas plants aren't generating as much, in particular due to increased competition from renewables. Some coal plants are still generating a lot, but that doesn't mean they're economic. Whether or not you like fracking, the reality is that more gas-fired capacity is on the way. 19 gigawatts, which is 19,000 megawatts, is scheduled to be added to the grid in 2017. A significant portion of this is going to be in PJM. According to SNL Financials, some 71 gigawatts of new combined cycle plants are in the pipeline. Unclear how much of this will be built. My guess is a lot of it will not be built. Back in the early years of this century, or in the late 1990s, when there was deregulation, there was a big push for companies built a lot of natural gas plants which didn't run a lot because there was no need for them to run a lot. But even if only a small percentage of this gas-fired capacity is built, it will provide further competition to coal-fired generators, especially on top of all the wind and solar resources that have been added to the grid and that are expected to be added in coming years. The risk to coal from rising plant production costs. This is an example using the Navajo generating station. These are the annual production costs in dollars per megawatt hour that one of the plant's owners, Arizona Public Service Company, which owns, I think, 14% of the plant, has reported each year. And you can just see the production costs are going up. Why? Some of it's fuel cost. Some of it is fixed operating and maintenance costs. Some are variable operating and maintenance costs. In addition, if you're looking at dollars per megawatt hour, for plants like a coal plant, like Navajo, there are fixed operating costs and there are variable operating costs. As the plant's generation goes down, which Navajo's generation has gone down, you're spreading the fixed costs over fewer units, so the impact of those fixed costs goes up per unit. As generation declines, that's part of the story here. But the reality is they become more expensive to operate on a per megawatt hour basis. And if we looked at numbers, total cost to operating, they've either stayed flat or gone up as well. That's what I just explained. So keep that in the back of your mind. Now we're going to focus on renewables. Steel for fuel is a term that's becoming more and more used. It means replacing fossil-fired generators with renewable wind and solar. A couple of takeaways that we'll be going over in the next slides. Solar and wind installation costs and the prices of power purchase agreements from renewables have been declining dramatically in recent years. Further decreases are expected in coming years. Some companies and analysts expect that wind and solar resources will remain competitive even after the wind production tax credit and the solar investment tax credits are gone. I've seen estimates from NextEra Energy that are supported by UBS Financial that predict that in the early 2020s, PPA prices for wind will be in the range of $20 to $30 per megawatt hour, and for solar maybe $30 to $40 per megawatt hour. That's utility scale solar. These PPA prices would be below the marginal operating costs of many coal-fired generators. As a result, wind and solar are posing increasing risks to the financial viability of coal. Up until about a year and a half ago, we have an annual conference in March of every year, call it Energy Finance Conference. And when I spoke 2 years ago, I talked about how, well, renewables are coming, and then I caught myself because I looked at the numbers, and renewables are here, as you'll see. You may be aware, but you'll see numbers. They're here in large numbers, and they're getting bigger. With no fuel costs, utility-scale solar and wind facilities are dispatched first in the competitive markets, displacing the energy that would otherwise be generated at coal and gas-fired plants. Solar energy, of course, produces the most during the sunny afternoons. Solar keeps energy market prices low during the afternoon periods when demands are highest. Wind generation does the same, mostly during off-peak hours, but also in some areas produces significant amounts of power in peak periods, depending on the location. Increasingly, wind and solar are leading to negative energy market prices, which is really bad news for coal plants that have to generate, for whom it's more economic to keep operating during those low demand periods than shutting on and off, because coal plants are not efficient at following load. It takes them a long time to crank back up the power when they've been turned down. Distributed rooftop solar PV resources, you don't bid them into the market. Instead, the benefit they produce is by reducing the loads on the grid. For example, the solar panels on my house are producing power now, reducing the load on the ISO New England grid. That leads to lower market prices and also reduces the need for generation from fossil-fired plants. This is a hypothetical illustration of the impact of adding more renewable capacity on the energy market clearing prices. The top graph shows a dispatch curve. That's the curve in blue that increases slowly and then rather dramatically. All along that line is composed of dots. Each dot is the variable operating cost of a power plant. Where the electricity demand line, that vertical line, crosses the dispatch curve, is the market clearing price. It's the price of the generator that's the last generator needed to operate during that hour. Excuse me. All of the plants that generate during the hour get paid that market clearing price. In this hour, this is from MISO, from 2 or 3 years ago, the market clearing price was $35.23. What I did was I just added 10,000 more megawatts of wind and solar to the front of the dispatch curve because, again, that's where they go because they have zero dispatch cost. It pushes the entire dispatch curve to the right. That means that the plant, which now is setting the market clearing price, is more efficient, so the market clearing price is only $32.49. So that's a benefit to consumers. In addition, plants that would have otherwise generated are no longer generating because of the presence of the wind and solar. I didn't list all of the coal-fired capacity that would have otherwise have been generating, but one of the units is RM Schaefer 17 in Indiana. So you can see how it operates, how the impact of the addition of more renewables. Wind installation costs have dropped significantly, down by 27% from their peak in 2009 and 10. At the same time, wind operating efficiency and performance has increased dramatically. The hub heights, the height of the wind tower, turbine, and rotor diameters have increased significantly. Wind project capacity factors have increased over time. For example, the average capacity factor among wind projects that were completed in 2014, this isn't everything in 2015, the average capacity factor among wind projects built in 2014 was 41%, compared to an average of only 31% in 2015 for projects that had been built in earlier years. The wind price, the declining wind installation costs have led to significant declines in wind PPA prices since 2010. In particular, if you look at the purple bars are nationwide. The bottom line, the purple line with the little square markers, is for the interior. That's the section I pointed out before that has the most significant wind in the U.S. I see a lot of questions are coming in. I'm sorry I got distracted. To answer Jay's question, no, there's no market clearing price that universally would mean cessation of operation of U.S. coal plants. It depends on location. What is it they say in real estate? Location, location, location. That's true with power plants. A plant that may be uneconomic in the Southwest Power Pool, where there's a lot of wind, or in ERCOT in Texas, might be economic in Pennsylvania or in the Southeast. You really have to look at local conditions and local markets to determine that. Ruth, I'll give you whatever documents you want and need. The other lines on the slide 32 about wind PPA prices are, let's see, there's the Northeast and the West, and also Great Lakes area. Solar installation prices have also declined significantly. You can see the residential, non-residential declining costs. Utility scale are larger. The larger facilities that you'll see in wind and solar farms. Further declines are expected. Interestingly and importantly, that Eric, I see I didn't answer your question, but I will get to it. Promise. If I forget, we can talk offline. The U.S. government DOE had a goal of an installation price for solar of $1 a watt, which is $1,000 a kilowatt. The plan was to reach that goal in 2020. It was met in 2016. As a result of declining solar installation costs, solar PPA prices have been dropping like they're hot. I think I stole this from either SNL Financial or UBS Financial. And they've declined even further from $41 per megawatt hour. Slide 35 just shows you the growth in wind and solar. These are nationwide figures. I'm going to go in a minute to regions, because again, it's really important to look at states, regions, even portions of states. Let's see, Paul is asked, since Western coal is less expensive than Eastern coal, can we expect to see closure of more Eastern mines as plants re-engineered to accept lower BTU Western coal? unclear to me whether that will happen. Again, I think you need to look plant by plant. I'm uncomfortable making any kind of broad generalization like that. One thing we know that is happening is that even though the price of coal out from the Powder River Basin is less, that there are higher transportation costs. For example, we did a big study on coal plants in Texas that was switching from mines that were located right next to them because those mines were being depleted to getting coal from the Powder River Basin, which, I don't know, what do you think, 1,000 miles away? And they weren't saving that much money in coal fuel costs because they were paying a lot for transportation. So again, you need to look plant by plant. Slide 36 shows growth in wind and solar resources in ERCOT. The dashed red line is the wind, increasing wind resources in ERCOT. There was 17,000 megawatts of wind in ERCOT, installed in ERCOT by, I think it was early February of this year. They expect to have nearly 21,000 megawatts by the end of the year, another 4,000, I believe, next year. Much less solar, but you can see that the projections are solar is going to take off, and by 2031 there'll be a tremendous amount of solar in Texas. So what this is doing, what the wind's done, has hurt coal during off-peak hours, but at least 5,000 megawatts of this wind in Texas is located on the coast, but next to the Gulf of Mexico, and it produces its maximum output or significant output during peak hours as well. And the solar will just gut prices for coal plant output during peak hours. Slide 37 shows increasing wind capacity in the Southwest Power Pool, MISO and PJM. Not much in PJM. The other two areas are more are located in a better wind area. Although the wind in PJM, certainly offshore wind is a potential, and also off the Great Lakes. Wind and solar highlights. On March 19th, for a few hours, Southwest Power Pool served over 54% of its load with wind. A few days later, ERCOT served over 50% of its load from wind. 8 states generated more than 15% of their electricity in 2016 from wind. 5 of those states generated more than 20%. Iowa, South Dakota, Kansas, Oklahoma, and North Dakota were the major wind generating states. Again, they're all in that, just think Texas to the Canadian border, in that zone of the U.S. Solar served more than 50% of the demand in California on March 11th. This drove any energy market prices per hour negative, which no generator is happy to see. The increasing wind generation, you can see from slide 39, gas is kind of going up and down. Coal is declining, and wind is increasing significantly. In fact, from 2011 to 2016, coal-fired generation in ERCOT declined by 28 million megawatt hours, while wind generation or generation from wind increased by 25 million megawatt hours. Gas and wind are displacing coal in PJM. you can see that coal's share of the generation mix has declined over a little more than a decade, from 56% to around 30%. Same story in Southwest Power Pool. What I find interesting here is that natural gas in the Southwest Power Pool is relatively flat. I mean, up and down, but it hasn't grown much. And wind is steadily increasing. As I'll get to in a couple of slides, or maybe next, experts, the people who run the Southwest Power Pool, believe that they can ultimately handle a 75% penetration, which means that at periods they would be able to serve 75% of their load from wind. That's going to really hurt the coal plants. More wind is on the way. U.S. wind developers are currently proposing to invest $96 billion in new wind projects over the next 4 years, would mean 49,000 megawatts of new wind capacity, 10,000 megawatts in MISO, 12,000 in Southwest Power Pool, 8,000 in ERCOT. Those are the main areas. If you add those three up, what do you get? 30,000 megawatts. So there's roughly another 19,000 megawatts in other areas. You can compare this 49,000 of expected new wind is more than double what was added in the last 4 years. The U.S. solar market is expected to triple in the next 5 years. One of the exciting developments, at least to me, is that industrial and commercial businesses are now contracting directly with wind and solar developers rather than going through utilities. It's expected that this market will grow to between 10,000 and 50,000 megawatts over the next 5 to 7 years. I mean, all these numbers are just gigantic and are not good news for coal. One of the reasons I expect, besides market forces, declining costs, increasing efficiency of renewables, one of the reasons why I expect that the administration will be unsuccessful in attempting to curtail renewable development is that there's strong bipartisan political support for renewables. You can see the numbers here. Wind and solar employ many more workers than coal. Wind is considered the newest cash crop in the Midwest. There's a very strong wind lobby. I'm not sure how strong the solar lobby is. And even GOP officials and former officials are pushing for grid development to support wind, increased renewables, and some of them for a carbon tax, remarkably. The impact of low energy market prices. At the same time, you can see the vertical bar there, at the same time gas prices collapsed, energy market prices collapsed, which is no surprise because gas sets the margin in many hours in many areas of the country. Paul, the question about how much new high voltage transmission will be required to serve these wind generators, the answer is there will need to be more transmission. It depends on where you're looking. So I don't have a number for the country. I've seen that areas ERCOT believes they have to add more wind transmission. They will need to. Southwest Power Pool is the same. I see there are more questions. Geez, I'd like to stop and answer all of them, but I'll never get through. Let me try to get through and then answer questions. Low energy market prices, unsurprisingly, means less revenue to coal plant owners, zero on negative energy market prices caused by renewables, are in large part are significant factor leading to these low energy market prices. But low energy market prices not only lead to less revenue because the plant owners are getting less per megawatt hour they sell. In addition, the plant owners are generating less because plant owners, rather than operating their plants as base load, which means operated flat out as much of the time as possible, they're seeking now to either seasonally operate their plants or to operate them trying to follow load up and down. This is Plant Barry, the coal plant in Alabama we discussed earlier. If this had been 8 years ago, you would have seen the plant generation line flat around 600,000 megawatt hours a year in order to, because it was base load. Now up and down because there's less expensive generation. And there are some plants that only operate for 6 months of the year, the winter and the summer periods. Now, this is years ago, if you can remember, the coal industry said, oh no, when coal plants are retired, energy market prices are going to go up, it's going to be uneconomic, it's all BS. The reality has been that energy market prices are lower, large part because of gas, but also because of increased renewables. Sorry, somebody sent a funny question. This threw me off stride. In addition to having low average prices, there are many fewer spikes in energy market prices. The prediction from the coal industry was that it would be a disaster if you got rid of all these low-cost coal plants. It hasn't happened. You can see here the bars show the number of hours in a year when market prices in ERCOT reached or exceeded $500 per megawatt hour, many fewer as the years have gone by, and the average real-time electricity market price has been lower. This is the same story in Southwest Power Pool, many fewer spikes. So retirement of coal plants has not led to grid a major impact on ratepayers, and I would not expect to do so in the coming years. Okay, low peak load and energy sales growth. There has been little to no growth in peak demands over the last decade. You can see in PJM, at the top orange line, it's up and down some. MISO, I only have 3 years of data. The others are relatively flat. What this means is that as new renewables and gas-fired capacity has been added, yes, some coal capacity has been retired, but there's greater competition for the electricity demand pie that's not growing much, if at all. Same is true for energy sales. Now, the peak demand is megawatts, energy sales are megawatt hours. You've got more competition to coal, which is not good for coal. Now, I think this is fascinating, but I just may be peculiar. PJM issues a load forecast every year. Those load forecasts have been declining. As you can see, the lines go from 2015 forecast to 2016 to 2017. In 2015, PJM predicted its peak load in 2016. The next year, 7 months later, would be something on the order of 158,000 gigawatt. I'm sorry, 158 gigawatts, 158,000 megawatts. 2 years later now, in 2017, PJM projects that same peak, 158 gigawatts, will not be reached until 2030. Again, supply and demand. There's more supply for stable demand, meaning more competition from gas and renewables hurting coal. Why are demand and energy load so flat? Impact of formal energy efficiency of investments and increased interest in consumers in saving energy. Increased generation from distributed rooftop solar and PV. Increased efficiency in using energy, especially in industrial and large utilities, and changing residential consumption habits. All of these are likely to dampen future growth. Another impact of flat loads and increased demand is that there's a lot of excess capacity. Generally, reserve margins, depending on where you are, or the planned reserve margin may be somewhere between 15, 18, 20%. In the Southwest Power Pool, all of the wind has meant that there's tremendous reserve margins, which makes it easier, reduces the risk, the reliability risk of retiring coal plants. We could look, the same is true in other regions of the country. Lower and/or volatile capacity market prices, and we are getting close to the end, folks. 4 ISOs have capacity markets. ISO New England, New York ISO, PJM, and MISO. PJM and MISO, the most important for coal. In these markets, coal plant owners bid their capacity into auctions. As in the energy market, there's a set market clearing price. All of the megawatts from plants that clear the auction, that are selected in the auction, get paid this clearing price, but not all of the capacity from coal plants clears each year's auction. Capacity markets, the key thing here is capacity markets provided essential revenues for coal plants that would otherwise be uneconomic if they're because their costs of production are higher than energy market prices. We've seen that in a number of our studies. This is from MISO, the results of the last 4 auctions. They do it a year ahead, or actually a few months ahead. So they just did an auction for the 2017-2018 planning year, which starts on June 1st, 2017 and goes to May 31st of 2018. You can see the price jumped in the Southern Illinois zone of MISO from roughly, I think it was $16 per megawatt day, excuse me, to 150, then dropped down to 72, and just dropped down to $1.50 per megawatt day. That's nothing. That's not going to bail out many coal plants. The capacity prices in recent PJM auctions have been up and down. You can see them bouncing up and down, bouncing up and down. Later, PJM does a 3-year ahead auction. So in May, there'll be an auction to provide power for the year that goes from June 1st, 2020 to May 31st, 2021. Again, when you get into a case where you're arguing with a coal plant owner about the financial viability of its plant, they will come in with estimates that show capacity prices going up and up and up and up. You can see here that's between PJM example on slide 61, MISO in slide 60. There's no evidence for that. The evidence, in fact, is completely contrary to any claim that capacity prices are going to continue to climb. The risk from coal plant to aging, you can see that in portions of the U.S., this is not everywhere in the U.S., the coal plant fleet is aging. In PJM, over 2/3 of the fleet is older than 40 years, more than 58% or 58% in the Southeast, roughly half in MISO. Now, why is that important? Aging, as with us, aging carries a potential for higher O&M expenses. the need for increasing capital expenditures to replace failing or degraded plant equipment, structures, or components, degrading plant performance either in terms of more forced outages, lower generation, higher heat rates, which heat rate measures efficiency. The higher it is, the less efficient the plant is. As plants get older, coal plants, they're less efficient. They're increasingly cycled, as I showed before with regard to plant Barry. It's believed this will cause will worsen their possible degradation. Now, the risk to coal from nuclear plants in the Southeast. I'm not arguing in favor of completing these plants, okay? I've testified that each of the 2 coal plants under construction are very expensive for ratepayers. The builder of the plants, Westinghouse, has gone bankrupt. But it's my belief that the plants will be completed. I hope ratepayers aren't screwed too badly. But if they're completed, they're really going to crowd out existing coal and gas in the Southeast. For example, SCANA, which owns South Carolina Electric and Gas, is the owner of 55% of the 2,200 megawatt Summer 2 and 3 project in South Carolina. It projects that coal's share of its generation mix will decline from 36% in 2016 to only 18% in 2021 after the new coal units are online. So that is going to have there'll be a similar impact in Georgia as well. I would expect more of the Georgia Power coal plants that are operating as baseload will stop operating as baseload. The ones that are not the most efficient will probably go to significant lower capacity factors, higher per megawatt hour production costs, and become peakers. And the last slide is, if you have questions, want to follow up, talk about this, email me and we can either talk via email or over the phone. And I don't know, is it, let's see. I see a couple of questions. Doug, I have no view on the Red Sox. I'm a Mets fan. Sheldon, the slides will be available later today. I believe they'll be up on the web. Feel free to circulate them. Paul mentions that the current discussion is for Georgia to cancel the nukes but get full cost recovery. Maybe that's true. I'm sure Southern Company would be happy to do that. We'll see whether they get built or not. I don't know. Have I missed any questions? I think Eric had one.
There's a couple here. So Paul asked if will electric vehicles be a major electric load in the coming years?
I would imagine they will be some of a load. I've not done an analysis to see how much of a load they will be. I know there have been studies by the Rocky Mountain Institute and by my old firm at Synapse. I think they've looked at the impact of electric cars. I'd suggest you look there. It's not something I've focused on. It will be something that will boost loads. Whether it counterbalances the other forces that are acting to reduce loads or keep loads low, unclear.
Okay, this is another one from Paul here. How much of the transmission will be FERC jurisdictional versus state PSCs? And will this impact transmission cost recovery?
Yeah. Even though I am a lawyer, that's beyond me. I don't have a clue. I know that transmission and transmission generally the large lines are regulated by FERC, especially in the ISO areas. I don't know. I know that low voltage transmission lines are regulated by states. I don't know where the break is, and I've just told you just about everything I know about the transmission. Sorry.
This next question is from Jay. Says, David, great presentation, thank you. He'd like to use Pennsylvania coal mines in the following question. It appears that each plant is struggling, perhaps Homer City the most. Can a case be made that converting X amount of GW in the PJM market would lead to Homer City's closure? I do not know if power allocation works that way, but it would provide a clearly defined target for the renewables industry. I think there is substantial untapped market who would readily convert if renewables were properly marketed, at least here in New York State.
Well, Homer City is interesting. Homer City is a 3-unit, got that right, I think, coal unit in the middle of Pennsylvania. It's just emerged from its second bankruptcy in 5 years. The new owners believe that the plant is going to be economic because it's going to operate more than it has. They predict high energy market prices. I think they're fooling themselves. I think it's going to be overwhelmed by the same market forces that caused the first 2 bankruptcies. I don't think there's much of a chance that it's going to survive. I'm not predicting next week. I don't know when, but I don't think that it's got much of a chance. Especially with all the new gas capacity coming online in PJM. We'll have to see.
Okay, 4 more questions here for you, David. How much will high voltage transmission be required to serve these new wind generators?
I thought it depends on where you're talking about. I've not seen the studies. I just have spoken to somebody in Texas who works for ERCOT and have read about Southwest Power Pool that, yes, we'll need some new transmission lines in order to be able to greatly increase. In Texas, well, let me say it this way. In Texas, the wind is located in West Texas, and the cities are in the middle to East Texas. So you need transmission lines to get the wind from the west to the east. Texas, led by our current DOE Secretary, William, what's the guy's name? Perry? Governor Perry promoted the development of renewable energy zones. And the state built transmission lines which enabled the development of all the wind. Rick Perry, thank you, Michael. And I think we should do the same other places.
Okay.
But transmission's beyond me. I'm sorry. Eric had a question. Can you go back to Eric's question?
Sure.
I can't see. Oh, I guess I could
Eric,
see it.
you've been very patient. Thank you. So Eric's question is, do the projected O&M costs include the required installation of SCR in the coming years?
You're talking about Navajo. The answer is I'm not sure. The numbers I've used are Salt River Project's estimated operating costs for the plant, and it does not say whether it includes SCR for NOx control under the regional haze rule.
David,
Have we missed? Sure.
Oh, just one more for you. Actually, 2 more. Finch Ratings 2017 Outlook, published in December 2015, indicates a steep, unexpected rise in costs remains a long-term risk as reliance on gas-fired generation grows. Please comment.
I don't agree. I don't know what else comment. I'd be interested to see what they've predicted in the past. I don't see how it happens. As much as I dislike the way fracking is done, and I'm certainly not here as an advocate for fracking, there's a lot of gas in the U.S. and a lot of gas that's going to be produced. And the current administration has this crazy view that they're going to somehow make coal great while expanding gas production. I mean, really, if we were not concerned about CO2 emissions from gas and fracking, I know they're big concerns, but if we weren't, the quickest way to kill coal in the U.S. is by expanding gas production. More gas production means lower gas prices, which means lower market prices and more displacement of coal-fired generation. So if the administration's current plan of increasing gas production actually happens, it's the worst thing they could do for coal. The worst. And I would guess they'll do it because they don't know what they're doing. So I don't think, Ruth, I don't think you got to be awake in the middle of the night to worry about a steep rise in gas price. It'll go up and down, sure. But the question is whether it will go up significantly and stay there. I don't see it. If you were at our conference in March, Tony, you went from, what is it, Citigroup, who's an absolute expert on it, doesn't believe it's going to happen either. Okay, I see a question from Michael. Is securitization a viable option to accelerate retirement? I have seen it. I've seen that, yes, proposed as an option for retiring coal plants and using the funds for renewables. I think when you talk about viable, it's not only an economic or financial question, it's a political question. Whether you can get this the company to agree to do it. Jay has a question. One of the striking things about fracking gas is tremendous efficiency gains. Yeah, I mean, I just think we have a lot of gas and they're going to produce gas from it. And that's not good for the communities who live near it. It's bad for the CO2 emissions from gas. But it's really bad. Well, I can't say which is worse. It's bad for coal as well. And I'm going back through to see if I got Eric's. Yeah, I guess I did get Eric's.
Yep.
Any other questions before we call it a day?
Nope, I think that's it. There's a couple comments for you, David, in there. But we want to thank everybody for attending today and for giving us a few extra minutes in your day to answer some additional questions. Again, please feel free to reach out to David at his email that's up on the screen right now. And you can reference the presentation on our YouTube channel later this evening. Thank you all for attending.